Hello everybody, today I'm going to show you 4 easy painting ideas that you can recreate with gouache. You can use all kinds of gouache. I used the Himi Jelly gouache for the first 2 paintings and acrylic gouache for the second page spread. So let's create some really cool drawings. So at first we're gonna use the Himi gouache and the Moleskine watercolor sketchbook. I really love it for gouache because it can handle a lot of water. And then I added some tape right all around the page, and that makes the page a lot smaller, so I don't always do that, but it also makes the painting much cleaner. So you can see here that I scooped out the colors that I wanted, and then I mixed them until I was happy with the consistency that I got. With the Himi gouache, you need quite a lot of water to get it to a consistency that's thin but also creamy, so you have to play around with that a bit. And then I sketched those clouds. They're pretty simple, and then I did those rays of sunshine. So this is really a simple drawing. You can make it more complicated and add more details if you want, but the ground structure of this piece is really not that hard to do, so it's very good for beginners, and it's also a good practice for gouache if you don't have a lot of experience with it yet, because if you want to do simple clean layers like that, you're gonna need more layers probably if you use cheaper gouache like I did here. I think I did a total of 2 or 3 layers here, and it was still not completely clean and flat, but it's a good practice to do, and you will learn how much water and how much paint you will need for this. You might go overboard and use too much paint or too much water, but it's a very simple practice piece, and I think for that reason I made it the first piece here, and I think it's very useful. Even if you are more experienced with gouache, I mean, I've been using gouache for a long time, but I haven't used the Himi gouache much since I got it, because I just recently got it. It took me a whole lot of time to jump on that trend. So I'm still practicing with that medium a little bit, and since it is more affordable gouache, it is a little bit trickier to work with than the more professional gouache that I used to use, or I'm used to using. So it takes a bit, but I have to say it's better than some other gouache that I've used, so it's not bad. It's just not the high quality end of the spectrum. It's somewhere in the middle, and I would say it's worth the price. But for pieces like this, you're gonna need a lot of patience because you might need more layers, and you have to accept that it's not going to look perfect, because otherwise you will drive yourself crazy. Trust me, I've tried to make things like that look perfect in the past, and at some point I just accepted that that's not gonna happen. I think it still looks fun even if you can see some of the blotches on there. I think nobody will look that closely on your piece, and so this is a good warm-up piece that you can do in your sketchbook. Just rays of sunlight and some clouds. So here's the finished piece for the first page. And then with the same colors, I challenged myself to use what I already had on the palette. I decided to paint this little fish friend, and fish are also always a good idea to paint for a warm-up or for beginners, because if the proportions are off, it's really not that big of a deal if it is a fish. And I just painted some fish. I don't know what kind of fish it is, and honestly, I don't really care. I just wanted to have fun with this. And as you can see here, I tried to get a flat layer on the background. It's still a bit blotchy. Again, if you strive for perfection here, you're gonna drive yourself super crazy. And I just did 1 layer with the background, and it's in the sketchbook after all and doesn't have to be perfect, so I let it stay like this. I could have added another layer of the light orange tone, but I didn't really feel like doing that. And after painting the fish, I don't think the background stands out as much anymore. So this is where we are right now, and you can see that I added the scales here and a bunch of details that are super fun to do and really don't have to be perfect. So I think that's a very good idea to do this as a no pressure piece, because if it doesn't look exactly like a fish would in real life, it doesn't really matter that much. It's not that big of a deal. I would say if you're painting something like a portrait, it's much easier to tell if you've made a mistake. And so something like a fish is a really good idea to do. So here you can see I'm removing that tape again. And here's the final page, and it's in the same color scheme as the other one. My next idea is to get inspired by a book that you have. And this one I got from my birthday, and I love the illustrations in here. I especially love the sun. It looks so cheeky. And I'm not saying completely copy the art and claim it as your own, because that would not be ethical at all. But what I did here is I looked at various illustrations in that book and just got inspired and got a general theme for my page. And at first I put down this dark brown layer. It almost looks black on camera. It's a bit lighter in real life. And then I started to mix my colors and started to paint the first leaves. And for this piece, I was using acrylic gouache. And if you're using water-soluble gouache, meaning that it can be reactivated with water, then I recommend painting on a black paper or darker surface, or just skip the black part and background altogether. Because if you're painting black first or a darker color first, and then you paint on top of that, you will probably reactivate the previous layer, and it will be really hard to do that, especially for beginners. But with acrylic gouache, that's not an issue because it is waterproof. So it doesn't matter how often I go over the background here and how much water I use. I'm not going to reactivate the layer because it is dry and it is waterproof. So that's the difference between those two mediums. And for illustrations like that, I really prefer the acrylic gouache because it's not so much of a hassle. You don't have to be careful. You don't have to paint around things. You can just build up the layers without fear. If I were to do an illustration like this with water-soluble gouache, like I said, I would use a dark background, or I would paint the leaves first and then paint the background around the leaves, which is much more work, but it's still easier than reactivating the previous layer. I hope that that tip helps some of you, because I've seen so many comments about people who have issues with reactivating the previous layer, and I will address this at one point and give you some tutorials about that. So stay tuned for that, hopefully. And I'm also going to be working on a course again about gouache and really putting everything that I know in there. So I will give you more of an explanation about this soon. And for now, here's the finished page for this. And now we're gonna do something on the other side as well. And I used acrylic gouache again for this. And I mixed a very light blue tone at first. Then I put the tape on the other side. And if you put a tape on top of your illustration, be very careful that it's not gonna rip your illustration afterwards. And here you can see that I was using a very wide brush, and I did kind of a dry brush technique for the clouds, and then I mixed this green tone, and I'm going to paint an orange tree here, and I just did those leaves, just very little blobs with the brush, and I did different shades of green. At first, this very bright tone, then a little bit of a darker tone, then I added in the shadow tone, and then I went over with the brighter tone again to give it a bit more depth. And then I added in the orange and a few little details, and we're done. This is probably the quickest one of them all. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to check out my shop since it's going to be closing soon, and also don't forget to check out No Issue if you have an online shop and are looking for some packaging, stamps, or whatever you need. You will get it there. Everything will be linked in the description box below. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. And then I mixed them. Hana, dul, set. I've had 2 Taekwondo lessons and now I can count to 3 in Korean. Yeah, I'm a genius. I think that's it.